In this short video, we are going to focus on posting your journals to the general ledger. And specifically, we are going to look at posting the cash book to the general ledger. At the end of every learning unit, make sure you work through the learning unit outcomes and just say to yourself, would I be able to answer a question based on each one of these outcomes? In learning units 4 and 5, there are a number of things that you can be tested on. You need to be able to prepare both the cash and credit journals, post those journals to the general ledger, then from the general ledger, prepare a simple trial balance, and even be able to correct a trial balance that is not balancing. In this particular video, our focus will be on posting your journals to the general ledger. And we are going to look specifically at your cash journals, your cash book receipts and cash book payments, and how we will post those two journals to the general ledger. So we're going to start off by posting our cash book receipts to the general ledger. We are going to make use of question 4.8 in your textbook. So maybe you have already done this question with your lecturer. If not, you can do this question then and work through this video as well. So in the first part of this question, you were required to prepare the cash books, cash book receipts and cash book payments. So this is what the cash book receipts would have looked like at the end of that part of the question. And now we're going to use this cash book receipts and we're going to post it to the general ledger. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to create a double entry out of this cash book receipts and we're going to post that double entry to our general ledger. So remember again, way back from Learning Unit 2, in Learning Unit 2, we learned that for every transaction, we need a minimum of 2 entries. And in fact, we called that the golden rule of accounting. If you have forgotten about this, refer back to your Learning Unit 2 and just refresh your memory on that. So in terms of the golden rule of accounting, we said every transaction needs a minimum of 2 entries. And with these 2 entries, the one entry must be a debit entry in your general ledger, and the other one must be a credit entry in the general ledger. So with other words, we're going to take our cash book receipts. As I said, we're going to create a double entry out of our cash book receipts. And you're going to see that there's going to be a debit side to this entry as well as a credit side. So here we are back to the cash book receipts and we're now going to create that double entry out of our cash book receipts. And the double entry is going to look like this. We're going to focus on the totals of our cash book receipts because remember, when it comes time to post your journals to your general ledger, we work as far as possible with the totals from the journals because in your journal, you have captured all the detail. So remember, on a monthly basis here in our journals, we capture the details. We capture the document numbers, the days of the transaction, the types of transaction. We split out the VAT out of the transaction, so the detail is already in the journal. So when it comes time now to post the journal to the general ledger, as much as possible, we only use the totals of the journal because we don't want to go and duplicate everything that we have now already done in the individual journal. And even though my video is now looking at cash book receipts, this will be the same whether you're working with a debtors journal, creditors journal, debtors allowances journal, petty cash journal. It doesn't really matter which journal you are using. Where possible, we are going to try and post the totals of these journals into the general ledger so that the general ledger doesn't have all the detail which we have already captured in the journal. Okay, so our double entry then, let's have a look at that. So how the double entry is going to work is we will debit our bank account, and then we are going to credit VAT output. We're going to credit sales, and we're also going to credit capital, the loan that was there, and the interest. So this double entry has got a debit and it does have a credit, but it actually has 5 credits. So it has 1 debit entry, but 5 credit entries. So this is another way that we can set it out just to make a bit more sense for you. So you can see we have got a double entry because we do have debit and we do have credit. But in this type of an entry, we have 1 debit entry. But on the credit side of this entry will actually go to 5 different general ledger accounts. So there are 5 different general ledger accounts that we need to credit and only 1 general ledger account that we're going to debit. But at the end of the day, you will see that my total debits are equal to my total credits. So our accounting equation will still balance because our debits are equal to our credits. So we're still following our double entry rules. It might just look a little bit unusual because we have these 5 credits and only 1 debit. Now, how do I know what to debit and what to credit? Remember to always use your dead click rule so that you are clear on what do I have to debit and when do I have to debit these accounts and what do I credit. So remember again, on the debt side, it means we are going to debit our expenses, assets and drawings, and we credit our liabilities, income and capital. And when do we debit it? We debit it with increases and with opening balances. So the opening balances and the increases always go on the debit side for expenses, assets, and drawings. And for liabilities, income, and capital, the increases and opening balances, so this OB is just for opening balances, those will always sit on the credit side. You can look again in your textbook in Learning Unit 2. They also did a detailed explanation of dead click and when do we debit and when do we credit. So this slide just shows it to you in a different way that assets, drawings and expenses, we are going to debit it with the increases, and then of course if there is a decrease it will go on the opposite side. For liabilities, capital and income, in this instance, the increases and opening balances sit on the credit side and any decreases will be on the opposite side, so on the debit side. As I said, if you're still battling a little bit with applying your dead click, please refer back to Learning Unit 2, and there's also a short video similar to this one based on Learning Unit 2. So when we post now our journal to our general ledger, there are steps that you need to follow. Step number 1 is to check the question and to see if there are any opening balances for this particular account. And if there are an opening balance, you will use your dead click to determine if you place this opening balance on the debit or credit side. Don't forget your step 1, because step 1 is always your easy marks. So in any assessment, make sure that you get all those easy marks, like putting your opening balances into your general ledger account and to have it on the right side of your account. Step number 2 says now we're going to go to the journal that we have to post from, and we're going to post. And remember, we said as far as possible we are going to post the totals. It's not always possible to work only with the totals, and you'll see it now in the cash box. But as far as possible, you're going to make use of the totals of the journal, post those to your general ledger accounts. And again, you're going to use dead click to determine if the entry must be posted to the debit or the credit side of that particular account. And then the last thing that you need to do is to balance your account properly at the end of the month. And again, this step 3 will also be some of your easy marks. So step 1 and step 3 are typically your easy marks to get in a question. So make sure you put your opening balances in and that you balance your accounts so that you can get those easy marks in an assessment. So let's now tackle that question 4.8 in your textbook, and we're now going to take our cash books, specifically cash book receipts, and we're going to post it to our general ledger. So in question 4.8, there weren't any opening balances. So step number 1, we can just skip for question 4.8 because in this particular question, they didn't give us opening balances. So we're going to jump straight into question step 2, where we're now going to use the cash book receipts to post to the general ledger. So this here at the bottom part of my slide, that's your general ledger, and here at the top of your slide, that is the totals of the cash book receipts. And as I said, I'm working with question 4.8. So if you do want to follow along, you can open your question 4.8 in your textbook. So the first number that we are going to post, we're going to post the total of the bank column to the bank account in the general ledger. And you can see here, I wrote down here, I'm going to use debt because my bank is an asset. Okay, so because it's one of my assets, it has to increase on the debit side. So I take my total cash receipts and I post it to the debit side of my bank account in my general ledger. Okay, so the first thing you have to note, if the column heading said bank, then it has to also say bank in the general ledger. Okay, so you can see my column heading in the cash book receipts had the word bank, and that's why I went to the bank account in the general ledger. So that's the first important thing to note, is that your name of the column must match up with the name in the general ledger. Then the next thing is to make sure that you've got your details correct. And we're just calling the details here total receipts because this refers now to all the cash that we have received for this particular month. So it refers to the sales and the VAT and the capital and the loan. We just put in one word for it, or two words rather, and we just say it was our total receipts. Then the next thing you always have to write down is your folio. And remember, your folio must tell us in which journal did you find this total. And we said we're working with the cash book receipts. So we write CBR because this particular total comes from the cash book receipts. And then the last thing, the amount that you're going to put in here, that amount has to match up with the total of the bank column. So the total of your bank column has to match up with the amount in your bank account. Okay, so now we've posted the debit side of this entry. So now we're going to move over and we're going to post the credit side of this entry. But you will remember that there were quite a few credits that we have to do. So for the credit side, there's not just going to be the single entry, there's actually going to be quite a few credit entries that we're going to make. Okay, so the first of these credit entries that we're going to make comes from the VAT output column. And once again, you can see in the general ledger, I'm working in the output VAT account in the general ledger. So once again, you can clearly see that the name up here of the column matches exactly to the account name in the general ledger. Okay, so that's your first thing to make sure you are posting to the correct column. Now, output VAT is a liability for the business because remember, that's what we owe the receiver of revenue. So for that reason, we are going to use click. And with click, it means that this account increases on the credit side. So you can see I'm now posting to the credit side of the output VAT account. The details, this time around, the details I'm going to write down is bank. And the reason I'm writing here bank is because remember the debit side of this entry was in the bank account in the general ledger. Okay, so my details must always be the name of a general ledger account and specifically the account where the other side of this entry can be found. And the other side, the debit side of this entry, is found in the bank account in the general ledger. Again, my folio refers me back to cash book receipts because that's where I've calculated this output VAT, and the amount is exactly the same amount as the total in the column in the cash book receipts. On this slide, I'm just reminding you again that your details must be a general ledger account name and it must tell us where is the other side of the entry. So that someone who looks at this general ledger must be able to tell the whole story of this transaction. And so when you look at this entry, you can now clearly see, oh, okay, the debit side of this entry can be found in the bank account. And if I want the detail of this entry, I can just go to cash book receipts. And in cash book receipts, I can find all the transactions that had output VAT or the cash transactions with output VAT for this particular month. And the total of all those transactions is 549160. And this total must match up with my total in the cash book receipts. Okay, let's try one more just to make sure you've got the hang of it. You can actually even pause the video here if you want to and try and see if you can post that sales total to the sales account in the general ledger, and then you can check yourself against this slide. So once again, remember we match the name of this column to the name of the general ledger account. So both of them says sales. Sales is income. So that means sales will increase on the credit side if I use dead click. And once again, I'm using the total of the column, not the individual transactions. I only need the total because the individual transactions are already in cash book receipts. I don't need to repeat it. And that's why under folios, I refer to cash book receipts. So I'm telling, remember this sales account is telling a story. And in the story, it is saying, if you want the detail, go to the cash book receipts for that particular month. And you can see all the sales transactions, the cash sales for that particular month. And then under details, remember, we write down where will be the debit side of this entry. And the debit side of this entry, and you can see it up here as well, the debit side of this entry lies in the bank account. Okay, so now earlier in this presentation, I said that as much as possible, we must try and post the totals from our journal to the general ledger because we don't want to end up repeating all the detail. So far we have posted these three totals. We have posted the first one to the bank account and then the next two to the output VAT and the sales account. But when it comes to your sundry entries, so when we work with the sundry entries, here we can't just use the total. because, as you can see, they go to 3 different accounts. One goes to capital, one goes to the loan, and one goes to the interest. So with these sundry entries, we do have to go and post those individual entries. So we can't just post it all to one account, because one entry was for capital, one was a loan, and one was interest. So now I do have to go and post each individual entry to my ledger. So the first one, the owner made a capital contribution. So the first thing we're going to post is that capital contribution. Again, I'm using dead click and capital increases on the credit side. Again, my details is bank. It tells me where's the other side of the entry. My folio, cash book receipts. So again, we can go back there for further detail, and the amount 55,000 rands. You can pause the recording here and then see if you can do the loan and the interest on your own. See if you can post those two general ledger accounts, and then you can restart the video and then check it against my slides. Okay, so now if you've restarted the video, it means you've now posted your loan account. So quickly check if you have posted it just like I have. And remember, when it comes to an assessment, everything carries marks. So having the correct details, that gives you a mark. Including your folio, that gives you a mark. Having the correct amount, that gives you a mark. And being on the correct side of the account, that also carries a mark. So with these general ledger accounts, you have to make sure you've got all your little details in place, because all these little details carry marks in an assessment, and obviously we want to optimize our marks that we get in any assessment. Okay, so if you struggled with posting this loan amount, see if you can now post the interest amount to the general ledger. So once again, just pause this slideshow over here and then try and see if you can post that interest amount of 17 rands 50 to your general ledger account. And then when you're ready, just start your video again and then check it against my answer. Okay, so now that you've rejoined me in the video, this is how we post the interest amount to the general ledger. And again, it goes on the credit side. I've got my details as bank, I've got my folio as cash book receipts, and I've got my amount 17 rands 50. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure you are reaching out to your lecturer. Either talk to them in class time or pop them a quick email if you are still not sure how to post to the general ledger, because this is a very important aspect of learning units 4, 5, and 6. So far, we've looked at posting the cash book receipts, and now I'm going to show you the cash book payments. So again, if you had completed question 4.8 and you've done the cash books, then your cash book payments should look something like the one up on the slide now. So once again, what we are going to try and do is we're going to try and create one double entry out of the cash book payments. So we want to summarize everything that's happened during the month in the cash book payments into one single double entry. And the double look like this. This time around, we are going to credit the bank. We are going to debit inventory and input VAT. And we are going to debit all of those sundry payments that we made during the month. So this one is going to have a single debit, rather a single credit entry, but it's going to have a whole host of debit entries. So here you can see it again. It's still a double entry, It still has a debit, it still has a credit, but in this scenario, it has only one credit, and then it has a whole host of debit entries. But once you've processed all these entries, you can see here on my slide, your debit and credit entries will be equal. So your accounting equation will still balance because our debits and our credits are equal. So in this scenario, we had one credit, but we had quite a few debit entries. We're going to practice just one or two of these just to make sure you've got the hang of posting from your journals to your general ledger. And remember again, even though this particular video focuses just on your cash journals or your cash books, the principles will be exactly the same for any of your other journals. So for your petty cash journal or any of your credit journals, you will apply exactly the same principles. So again, where possible, we're going to post the totals of the columns. And then if that is not possible, here under the sundry amounts, here we will post the individual entries. So this time around, we're going to post to the credit side of the bank account because now we are making cash payments. So our asset is getting smaller. Again, you can see I'm matching up the name of the general ledger account with the name of the column. So we're working with the bank column in the cash book payments. So I need to post it to bank in the general ledger. Again, I'm putting in the folio. This time around, it's cash book payments because the story it's telling is if you want to see the detail for all these cash book payments, just go to, rather, if you want to see the detail for all these cash payments, just go to the cash book payments for this particular month. And then you can find all the detail, the document numbers, you can get the names of the people, you can get the breakdown of the amounts. It's all there in the cash book payments. Under details again, we're writing total payments because remember, there was a whole host of payments we made and there's going to be a lot of debit entries. So instead of writing down the name of every debit account, we just say total payments. And my amount here matches up with the total of the bank column. You can see up here at the top where I'm showing you now, it matches up to the total of the bank column in the cash book payments. Then you can practice now on your own posting all the debit entries by doing exactly what we had done previously with our cash book receipts. This time around, it will just go to the debit side of all those accounts, and then you can double check yourself. Remember, the answers to the textbook questions are at the back of the textbook in Annexure A of your textbook. So you can then, once you've done the whole general ledger, you can go and mark yourself at the back of your textbook. So the third and last step that we need to do is we need to balance our general ledger account. In your textbook, in Learning Unit 4, they go into quite a bit of detail on how to balance your general ledger accounts. So you can refer back to your textbook. I'm just going to recap on it briefly in this video. First up is if you have only one entry in a specific general ledger account, then of course it's pretty easy to balance the account because the balance will just be that one amount, 60,000 rands. So if there's only one entry, there's really not much you need to do in terms of balancing the account because it only has that single amount in the account. If you have a number of entries, but they're all on the same side of the account. So in this example, we have a drawings account and all the entries for this particular month were just on the debit side of the account. So how we balance this drawings account now is we will purely add up all the entries on the debit side. So I took 220 plus 25, and that gives me 245. And now I've balanced this account. I'm ready for the trial balance. Then the last one, this is the more complicated one. This is now where we have entries on both the debit and the credit side of the account, and we now have to balance the account. Well, what we will do is we'll look at the account, we'll see were the debit or the credit entries, which ones were bigger. And in this particular example, the debit side is the bigger of the two. So I'm going to add together all the debit entries, and I'm going to get a total for the debit entries. Then I'm going to take that total, and I'm also going to write it down on the credit side of my account, and I do it in the same line. So I add up the debit side, I get a total. I take that total and I also write the exact same amount on the credit side. Then I take my total that I've now calculated and I subtract from it the entries on the credit side. And that then gives us the balance. Okay, so to calculate the balance, I take my total. So I take the total from the bigger side and I subtract from it the smaller side, and that then gives me this balancing number, and I refer to that as the balance CD, or the balance carry down. And then the last thing to do is I take that balance that I've now calculated and I take it to the opposite side of the general ledger account so that it can become my opening balance in the next month. So in the next month, the bank account is going to start with an opening balance of 127,542 and 52 cents. So that's how you will go about to balance an account that has got both debit and credit entries. You can also practice this as you complete that general ledger accounts for question 4.8. Remember again, your key is that you need to be working consistently at home and doing as many exercises as you can at home. And in your textbook, there are two excellent examples that deal specifically with posting cash and credit journals to the general ledger. And these examples are example 4.2 in Learning Unit 4 and example 5.1 in Learning Unit 5. So if you haven't had a chance to do these examples yet, I will strongly recommend that you do these examples as part of your revision for your test and your exam. Remember again, your key to success in Accounting 1A is to attend as many classes as you possibly can, to work consistently at home outside of class time. So by doing things like example 4.2 and 5.1, stay in touch with your lecturer. If you don't understand anything, reach out to your lecturer and don't fall behind. Okay, because once you fall behind, it gets very difficult for you to catch up with future work. Remember, reach out to your lecturer. That's what they are there for, to assist you and support you if you are not quite up to date with posting from your general ledger to, from posting from your journals to your general ledger. And please make sure that you are working with your textbook. Okay, please make sure that you are doing all the textbook examples and questions, even the ones that you haven't covered in class. You need to make sure that you are doing those at home so that you understand all the learning units. Please don't just rely on little videos like this, because this is just a teaching aid just to give you a bit of extra support. But the key thing is that you must be working with your textbook and any other resources that your lecturer has made available to you.